What's going on, everybody? Almost Counts Collectibles here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at my sealed collection of Saban's Masked Rider villains. Now there are 5 in total that we're going to take a look at. We have Count Dragon, Skull Reaper, Cyclopter, Double Face, and Robo-sect. So we're going to take a look at each one. We'll talk briefly about the packaging, the figures themselves, and my overall thoughts on the figures and the final product when it was all said and done. We will briefly talk about the show itself, but this is not intended to be a review of Masked Rider the show, so we will save that for a separate video. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first figure that we have here. And it is the main villain of the show. We have the Commanding Count Dragon. Now, Count Dragon's figure, overall, I think is well executed. It looks just like Count Dragon. But the one thing about this figure that I really wish they would have done differently was Count Dragon's helmet. Now, his head, his helmet, everything is one color throughout. You have this very darkish, dingy, kind of like an off brown or really off bronze color, and it's throughout. It's his helmet, his face, everything. And the one thing that I wish they would have really done differently here is make his actual helmet some sort of a gold, or even if they could have actually made it the reflective, like gold chrome, would have made a huge difference on this figure. His helmet was like a very shiny gold chrome look. And if they could have just captured that in this figure, it would have made a world of difference. But overall, the figure isn't bad. The mold is pretty good. He actually has a cloth cape. He comes with his little accessory here. He has his little staff that he has in many of the episodes. So overall, not bad. But if they would have just changed the color of the actual helmet and made it that actual gold or reflective gold chrome color, it would have made this figure fantastic. Now, on each one of the actual figures, as you can see kind of here in the back, and I'll throw up a picture for better reference so you can actually see it, but there in the background is a little instruction sheet to show you how to operate the figures. So for the most part, each one of the figures have some sort of little battle action, a button or a lever that you press. And with Count Dragon, you press the button and his right arm will actually go up and down and kind of wave his staff around. So that is the actual figure for him. Now you will notice that my Count Dragon, his bubble is slightly tilted. So it's not perfectly up and down, it's slightly tilted kind of at an angle. And I find this to be kind of a common thing with Count Dragon. I have seen several sealed Count Dragons for sale over the years where this is the case. So if you actually get your hands on one that his bubble is like perfectly up and down and centered on the card, it might actually be worth a little bit more than one that is like mine, because I don't see those quite as often as I do with the ones where their bubble is slightly tilted on the card. And for some reason, that's only a thing with Count Dragon. Most of the other villains are centered up pretty good and their bubbles are straight up and down, but for some reason Count Dragon has issues with that. So that is the front of Count Dragon's actual card here. The background on the particular packaging I liked. I like when they give us a little bit of different coloring throughout and it's not just one plain color. So I did like the different colors and the, you know, the shapes and everything that they did put on the cards themselves. You know, when you look at this, even if it didn't say Saban's Masked Rider or have a picture of Masked Rider, I personally could identify the card backard right away to what toy line it went to. So it was kind of distinctive in the way that they designed it. So I like the packaging. I like the way the graphics and everything are at the top, where they're located. All that good stuff. I thought the packaging overall was pretty good. We will look at the back of the cards because they're all the same on the last figure that we'll take a look at, and we'll go ahead and wrap the video up from there. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next figure, which is the Slashing Skull Reaper. Now, the slashing Skull Reaper, unlike Count Dragon and a few of the other villains, Count Dragon, Cyclopter, Double Face, all three of them show up right away in Season 1, Episode 1, and are present throughout the show pretty regularly, almost in every episode. The slashing Skull Reaper here actually doesn't appear until Episode 15, I believe it is, entitled The Green-Eyed Monster. So the slashing Skull Reaper is actually one of about 3 different entities, very similar. Now, this particular Skull Reaper actually doesn't represent kind of the main or leader Skull Reaper that actually had horns coming out of his head. So that was kind of disappointing. I would have preferred to have kind of the head honcho of these Skull Reapers, but this is kind of just one of the little henchmen Skull Reapers. And they come with their scythe right here that you can see to the side. Overall, not a bad figure. I would have preferred more of a kind of cloth costume with this, or at least some sort of cloth like robe-ish look. But overall, it's not a bad figure. I mean, it's just an extra villain, basically. It's not even the main villain of the 3 Skull Reapers. So it's not bad. He has a slashing action. That he actually, his arms wave up and down, and he can actually, wave his little scythe around. So not a bad figure, but one of the least detailed of all of the Masked Rider villains is the slashing Skull Reaper. So let's go ahead and move on to Cyclopter. Now you will notice with Cyclopter here, he is the only villain that actually indicates at the top of his nameplate that he is a mutant marauder. Even though, and we will take a look at here at the end, all of the villains are under the, under the title of mutant marauder, even advertised on the back. But he is the only one that indicates that on his actual nameplate. He is also the only one that indicates that he can be used with the talking bikes, some accessories that were actually released. So this is Cyclopter. He shows up in Episode 1 right away and is present pretty much throughout. Cyclopter, if you're familiar with Power Rangers, I kind of mostly relate to Goldar in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. He is a henchman of Count Dragon, but he actually does battle with Masked Rider fairly frequently. So, he has kind of the most hands-on, at least of the figures that we got. But in the Masked Rider universe, Cyclopter is probably closest to a Goldar type of figure that you could get. So this is Cyclopter. I think the figure, the detail of the figure was done well. It looks like Cyclopter. There isn't anything glaring about Cyclopter that I would change, like Count Dragon's helmet color. He does come with an accessory. He has his blaster over there. And once again, he can be used with the accessories. He had a motorcycle that he did battle with Masked Rider on that you could actually get and use him with. So that is Cyclopter. Moving on to our next villain, we have Double Face. So here is Double Face, one of the main henchmen, kind of like Cyclopter, of Count Dragon. Not just a one-hit wonder, but present throughout many of the episodes of the show. I think the figure on Double Face was executed fairly well. Not as bad as Skull Reaper, of course. There's more detail. Of course, his figure had more colors and things of that nature. But I do like the Double Face figure, and he actually comes with 2 accessories. So he has 2 blades, one larger sword and one smaller, almost a dagger type weapon. Has his little instructions back there. Once again, has moving arms to kind of flail his swords around. So for the most part, all of the figures feature a moving arm action. But this is Double Face. Once again, one of those main henchmen of Count Dragon. Pretty cool figure. His character was a little bit more serious. A little bit of the brainiac, always coming up with suggestions and like schemes to help defeat Masked Rider. But this is the double face figure from the Masked Rider line. All right, last, but certainly not least, because disc throwing Robo-sect is one of the cooler villain toys that we received. Comes with several accessories. So he has the little kind of tentacle things that actually go on his back. He has these little discs that he actually, you know, kind of shoots out. And then he has his little sickle. I guess you would closely relate that to. But basically how this works is the discs go into his little, you know, throwing blade thing that he has right here. And his arm goes up and down, but unlike the others where he basically just has the slashing action, he is actually throwing one of these discs out when you activate the little lever on his back. So the most accessories out of all of them, if you count his little tentacle things that go on his back, and then his weapon and all of the discs that he can actually throw, I thought the look of Robo-sect was very good. I mean, you know, they did a pretty good job of capturing what he looked like in the show. They even have his red little chest piece right here that Masked Rider in the episode Dance Crazy, I believe it was, where Robo-sect first appeared, thought was his weakness, and tried to deactivate his chest emblem. I guess he thought it was his power source, if I remember correctly. And he ended up activating the tractor beam on Count Dragon's ship and was being pulled up to the ship. But Robo-sect, I thought, was one of the cooler looking villains throughout the show. There were some, you know, unique and cool villains. The sad part about Masked Rider is there were some pretty cool characters in the show. Masked Rider himself, I thought, was a very cool character. And to be perfectly honest, I did like Masked Rider as a show. But I feel like the downfall of Masked Rider, which there are many things to include poor acting, uninteresting characters, just some other things that you could definitely point out that was a negative about Masked Rider. But one of the things that I feel like they had a chance to succeed at and really make this show something special was the fight scenes. I mean, you had some really cool characters, you had some really cool looking villains. If the fight scenes would have been better, I believe Masked Rider would have been better received as a show. But unfortunately, if you go back and watch Masked Rider, not that there's not enjoyment to be had. I like Masked Rider. My kids really love Masked Rider. But the combat and the fight scenes is just so disappointing most of the time that it really, to me, it was the main thing that hurt the show.
Save the record of this battle. I shall enjoy viewing it over and over again.
I could have lived with the poor acting on part of some of the actors. You know, I could have lived with the fact that the overall storyline just overall really isn't that interesting. I mean, you get the premise of the show pretty much from episode 1, and that's pretty much it throughout the show. You've got a bad guy trying to take some other guy's powers to use as his own, and he's constantly trying to get those powers throughout every episode, and the story just isn't very gripping. But I could have lived with all of those things. This silly, you know, talking vehicles and stuff, which, I mean, I actually thought was pretty cool. But I could have lived with all of that if the fight scenes were better and possibly even a little bit longer. But personally, even though there are some really cool special effects and stuff throughout, I just thought that the fight scenes is what really hurt it. And the villains, like I said, some of these villains, and the whole reason I'm talking about this, especially Robo-sect, there were some really cool villains. And it would have made for some really cool, longer, you know, fight scenes, but unfortunately, that was one of the major lacking areas of this. But the point that I was trying to get to with all of this, Masked Rider as a whole, is people often try to directly compare Masked Rider to its Japanese counterpart, Kamen Rider. And if you do that, you try to compare them at all or you hold this to the expectations of Kamen Rider, no matter which seasons or kind of generation of Kamen Rider you're watching or comparing it to, you're gonna be let down from day one. You can't compare this to that. You have to look at Masked Rider as its own completely different show, as some guy who just kind of looks like Kamen Rider. So don't directly compare Masked Rider with its Kamen Rider counterparts, and you might have a chance of actually enjoying it, but that's just my opinion. And here I go talking about the show when I directly said that this was not a review of the show. We will do a review of Masked Rider and many other shows and other videos once we get to it. But that is just my opinion of Masked Rider. And we did get some cool villains, and this was the last one that we were going to look at, which was the disc-throwing Robo-sect. But unfortunately, some of those fight scenes weren't very good. So moving on to the back of the packaging for the figures, it is a pretty basic layout, nothing to write home about as far as design or layout or anything like that. I really wasn't too impressed with it, especially compared to some other toy lines that were out that had way better packaging than this. So you basically just get the 4 mutant marauders that are here at the top, which is Skull Reaper, Double Face, Count Dragon, and Robo-sect. And then here at the bottom, we get images of Masked Rider, Mutant Marauder Cyclopter, which once again was the only Mutant Marauder to actually have that indicated on his nameplate on the front, and then Masked Rider Super Gold. Now, I believe the reason why Cyclopter is actually listed separate down here and not pictured with the other 4 that are at the top, and because he probably has that indicated on his nameplate and the others don't, is because he was a later wave release. I think he was the following wave release, and he was also one of the ones that they made a vehicle for, his motorcycle. So I believe that's why he's pictured different here, and his nameplate is probably different. I think is because he was that later wave release, if I'm not mistaken. But then we have Masked Rider and Masked Rider Super Gold, which we will get to in a separate video. So that is the basic layout and what it looks like on the back of the figures. And then here at the top, we have the story of Saban's Masked Rider. All right, so I've moved us a little bit closer here so we can actually read the story that they place at the top of the packaging. And I had to remove the back of the case so we could actually read it through the raised lettering of my case. But let's go ahead and check out the story. Dex, a teenage boy from a world light years away, is forced to flee his planet in the wake of devastation caused by Count Dragon, the supreme warlord of the universe. His next target destination, planet Earth. Using newly acquired powers, Dex can transmutate into the powerful Masked Rider, or the nearly invincible Masked Rider Super Gold. Masked Rider is Earth's last defense against the most sinister and destructive force in the universe. So that is the story of the Masked Rider. And I disagree with this story on so many levels, because when Masked Rider was first teased, it actually took place in a series of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It was actually season 3, the first, if not one of the first episodes in that season, and it was entitled A Friend in Need. Now, in that episode, the Power Rangers are notified by Alpha 5 that Alpha 5's home planet of Edenoi is under attack, and Alpha is requesting that the Power Rangers go assist the individuals on that planet. Now, the Power Rangers go, and of course they meet up with Masked Rider, and they end up helping Masked Rider fight off some of the like Poison Patrol, I believe they're called, on the planet. So that is how you get introduced to Masked Rider. So Masked Rider is obviously taking place in the same universe, on the same timeline as the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And it's even taking place in the same location because Dex comes to Earth where the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers are. And the Power Rangers, you know, if you step back and look at it, to me, are fighting some of the most destructive forces in the universe. Count Dragon, personally, I don't think has anything on any of the Power Ranger main villains. So to say that, you know, Masked Rider is the Earth's last hope, and he's facing the most sinister and destructive force in the universe and all that. I think those are some pretty big claims for a very weak performance and storyline of these villains, especially when you have them taking place in the exact same timeline, universe, and location of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So that they had a great opportunity there with placing it in the same universe, you know, having Edenoi as Alpha 5's home planet and tying that all in with the lore and everything of Power Rangers. You had a great opportunity to, you know, make this show 10 times what it was. They just didn't execute. So yeah, that's the story that you get. I'm not convinced at all by that story. Nor does the story really make me want to check out Masked Rider. So yeah, I thought the story was kind of weak, but that's just my opinion. Once again, my opinions on the show, which I said I kind of wasn't going to do, but I really couldn't help myself. So that is the back of the packaging. All right, everybody. Well, that has been our look at my sealed collection of Saban's Masked Rider villains. We will be taking a look at Masked Rider himself, Masked Rider Super Gold, and some of those other good guy characters in an upcoming video, as well as some of the accessories, vehicles, and things of that nature that were released. So let me know what you guys thought about these figures. Let me know, if you wish, what you thought about the show as well, since I definitely spoke about it, even though I said I wasn't really going to. But we're going to go ahead and wrap this video up. So until next time, everybody, I will see you next video.